it just was really warmed my heart. And also to see you as a family. I mean, it was very sweet that you shared, you feel like you're sitting between your two brothers, because that really comes across in the film. And there's a very warm feeling. And thank you for that. It was lovely to just be in the presence.
You know, every time when I see the film, not only that like Dan, I see something new that I haven't seen before, although I made the film, but how amazing that she was 16 when she came to New York, and she, and you can say probably until her last moment, she was speaking Austrian German, Viennese German. And I always wonder why this could happen, you know, because when you're 16, yes, your development of your language is finished, but still, she could have taken an American accent, but she didn't.
No, she couldn't.
No, she couldn't.
The only one relative of mine who's ever lost their German or Austrian accent, that's Susie. Susie had a gift for it, and her daughters do too, for mimicry. She just,
And Ruth always said that she had no talent for music at all. She wouldn't hear the music. She couldn't do anything with Mozart or Bach. It would be the same for her.
She had a collection of records. They were all spoken.
Yeah,
Every one of them.
but she loved beautiful dresses. That I like a lot. Yeah. If they're not, I'm not. Yeah.
I do if I could ask a question. It may not be one you want to answer, but it goes to that discussion of what isn't in the film or what's one wonders about in watching it. You said, I think very poignantly that your mother's memoir is in many ways a mother-daughter memoir, and that what we know through that and through the film of your grandmother comes through your mother's telling of it. And I wondered, watching it, if you'd ever thought of if you had your own independent relation to your grandmother, or those were stories you ever considered sharing or writing. Is that, again, it also speaks to that really intriguing idea of the intergenerational novel you mentioned, because it seems like there's now 4 generations of the family coming to the screen there.
I'm going to go into this one. In fact, it relates, Mark, also to your question, what's missing. What's missing, one thing that is missing is the complexity of my mother's relationship to her mother. And it was very different than my relationship with my grandmother. My mother, in the film, describes her relationship with her mother as getting better toward the end, which I think it did, but she describes her mother as always suspicious of her. There was a flip side to that. That is, my mother was very short with her mother always. The one time I would ever see my mother behave like a 5-year-old was in the presence of her own mother. And she was not nice to her mother. She had little patience for her, was constantly shooting her down. She did take care of her the last decade or more of her life. And I've always respected her for that, particularly knowing that there was not a close emotional bond on her part to her mother. Her mother, on the other hand, doted on her, not necessarily effectively, but my grandmother was always trying her best to get close to my mom, and it didn't work. I, on the other hand, had a really close relationship with my grandmother. She was, for me, a great-grandmother. I didn't have any of the baggage of her having raised me. She didn't, so I just saw her as the grandmother who was always sweet and nice. Always classic Jewish mother. I'd walk in the door to visit. I usually visited once a week, and I'd walk in the door. She'd say, "How are you? Sit down." And would just start feeding me. Both of us. So.
She also wrote her own version.
Yes. My grandmother wrote. I don't want to bore people too much. I'll try to keep this short. My grandmother wrote her own version of my mother's story. I mean, of their story, which I recently sent to Geza Donna, who's handling her literary estate, and Taylor is interested in publishing that as an addendum to not dividing the book, but just as a companion piece, I think electronically. It was not as well written, obviously, and differed in certain details. My grandmother was always trying to get me to, and I was working in the film business, she wanted me to help her get it published, and I knew it wouldn't get published. When my mom read her manuscript, I said, I think this is going to be well received. And she said, you're saying that because you're my son? I said, no, it's because it's analytical, which most of, all of these memoirs are not. And I just had a gut feeling it would do well, and I was right on that. My grandmother's book, on the other hand, was a straight recitation of events, and that story had been told many times by many people. I did not think it could get published, and if it does now, it'll be on the coattails of my mom's
She
book.
wrote in German?
She wrote it in English. She wrote it in English. But this is, we'll get to the real family dirt. My mom, to preserve my, I guess she wrote about this in the Gervais for a novel, which I have not read. But she did not want my grandmother to know that she'd written Vitralet. And she enlisted us, and in particular me, to keep the secret, which put me in the position of betraying my grandmother, which I
Sharon was
did.
telling me the same story. You enlisted him too.
It was a very odd moment, and then of course, one of your grandmother's friends got a copy of the book when it was published and gave it to your grandmother.
Yes, and go ahead.
No, to everybody's dismay, not because she got it, but because it had been hidden.
Yes, yes. And I remember walking up to my grandmother's door one day, and she's holding the book.
Yeah.
One of life's great oh shit moments.
Oh yeah, yeah. And by the way, your grandmother was not quiet about that.
No. And she forgave me too, by the way. She did not hold it against me,
Yeah.
which I had great respect for her for.
But when you say this was missing in the film, this was also a decision that I would not put in,
Oh yeah.
Because the only thing I was thinking about was, beside the fact that I said that I did everything the way I wanted to do it, but I did think sometimes, how much do you expose a Jewish woman that went as a child through Holocaust? How much of the intimacies of, this is not my meine Aufgabe, my assessment, my assignment. But if the family decides, and now a biography will be written by,
Irina
Heidelberg, So that's something different then. Then the family decided, okay, we let somebody write this biography, and then these things are very important. But the film didn't have this. And making film always means to make decisions. In every second of every film, it's a decision. And these are the decisions I took, and I take responsibility for it, and didn't want to expose her too much. So the people would say, people that were in the camps, they have quarrels in their families. Look at these Jewish people. No, I didn't want it. I wanted to protect her in some things, and she said some things in interviews also that I didn't want to bring in the film because I wanted to protect her. I didn't want her saying, no, if you film my husband, I'm not in this film anymore. Because I have it, and I gave the whole tapes, the original tapes, I gave it to the Austrian Museum, Österreichische Mediathek, des Technischen Museums, the Mediathek of the Technical Museum of the Republic of Austria, and it's open for everybody who wants research, who wants to make research. Okay? So, and then people can, for research reasons, go there and listen to everything that was said. But for my decision, I didn't want to put everything on the table. Maybe we finish, and I have a finishing sentence. My daughter, who studied Germanistic, when Ruth died, she said, Mom, I thought that Ruth can never die. And then she added, when she talked about literature, I knew that everything was said.
Thank you, Mr. Connell. We'll continue tomorrow at 11, right here.